Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Olga Atamanova, and it's my pleasure to see every one of you joining us in Ukraine Media Center, Ukrinform. Today we have invited you for the presentation of the report of the Commissioner for the Protection of State Language for the year 2023. Joining us today in our studio is Kremin, the Commissioner for the Protection of the State Language. Let's talk about the way the situation has changed within the last year. We will be talking about the achievements, positive achievements, and obviously some violations. So, Mr. Taras, the floor is yours. Good morning, dear friends, dear journalists, dear people of Ukraine. It's my pleasure to present our annual report here in Ukrinform on functioning of Ukrainian language as the state language within the year 2023. But first of all, I want to say that we want to thank all of the security and defense forces, every single defender, every single volunteer who contributes to reinforcing our people, reinforcing our troops in liberation of our territories and bringing our victory closer. With the day of the full-scale invasion until this very day, the law has passed a record historic way. So talking about the statistics of the year 23, within these 2.5 years, Ukrainian language has made an incredible way. From hundreds to thousands of times, it multiplied its presence in different sectors, both inside Ukraine and abroad. So now, presenting this report, I would like to emphasize the following. We were focusing our attention on those sectors that, in our opinion, were the most problematic within the last time. For example, the report analyzes the following 12 spheres: the government, courts, education, science, culture, media, transport, publishing, public services, advertisement, healthcare, and of course internet. So we'll be talking about software interfaces and websites. Let me mention it that within the year 23, just like during previous years, one of the factors that contributed to the rise of the status of Ukrainian language, we've identified the following factors. First of all is the war, the Russian-Ukrainian war, during which Ukrainians were able to self-identify their values, priorities, and obviously the language that they use not only in official sectors but also at home. That's a matter of national identity, national consciousness, self-identification, and language stability that is present in all regions of Ukraine under control of the Ukrainian government. Of course, at the second plan is the effect of the language law that is implemented in all of the sectors. All of the articles came into effect starting from the year 2019. Within these 5 years, the law started working everywhere, and I'm talking about all of the webs that we were discussing before. And this language stability was also augmented by those regulations that ensure functioning of the Ukrainian language as a state language. Of course, we also made our contribution as the Secretariat of the State Commissioner for Protection of State Language, because such work was never done before, and we are probably the only country in the world that continues protecting the state language by different government agencies. During year 23, there were significant movements at the level of the law in effect, and those changes that had to be amended. The year 23 was important for the beginning of negotiations of the accession of Ukraine to European Community in cooperation with the Parliament and the government of Ukraine. With our participation, there was a number of laws developed. I would like to emphasize the law of Ukraine on media that was prepared during years, and we know there were significant problems, but at the same time it's a matter of our responsibility and Euro integration efforts. It's also the amendment of the law on national minorities or communities, and we've complied with the recommendations of the Venetian Committee in full extent within the framework of the law of Ukraine on the language, the law of Ukraine on protection of consumer rights that we believe we will start working shortly, the law of Ukraine on decolonization of toponymics, and I urge the people's deputies, the members of the parliament, to review the draft and to return the historic names to those settlements that were under Russian yoke for decades or even centuries. We hope our proposals will be taken into account to the full extent. Also, we prepared the recommendations on the English language that was supported as the draft law for the development of the foreign languages as the languages of European Community. And in coordination with other government agencies, we were able to achieve the following. We resumed the procedure for the Ukrainian language testing. Instead of facilitated procedure, we've got the procedure that was required by the law on state language, amendments to the law on the citizenship of Ukraine, increased the status of Ukrainian language. You know that in compliance with those important documents to acquire Ukrainian citizenship, apart from the state language exam, the individuals are also required to pass the Ukrainian history and constitution exam. Those are the incredible achievements we never had during all years of Ukrainian independence, but again, upon these laws depended the beginning of the negotiations on accession of Ukraine to the European Community. So our Secretariat took all necessary efforts to achieve these results. Talking about other dozens of sociological surveys that we were able to see during the year 23, some of them were held with our participation, some of them without, by different civil society organizations, academia, who had common statistics. By the way, according to the results of the monitoring of the educational institutions, we got huge positive changes in the language that the teachers, students, and their parents use. I would like also to thank Ukrinform. These results, we keep presenting them in Ukrinform for a year in a row, for an umpteenth year in a row. And shortly we will be able to present the results of the curriculum years 23-24. We've made this research in coordination with Center for Content of Internet Web Pages. The Ukrainian version of the website is loaded for 80% of national web resources and 85% of regional web media. According to the study of web media, the index of media literacy of Ukrainian audience, the fraction of those who refuse the Russian information product is at 79%, and I would like to emphasize, the more the Ukrainian citizens use the state language, the more they speak Ukrainian at home. One of the sociological agencies, D. Gradus, shows that the majority of the Ukrainian citizens speak Ukrainian at home because the students at school speak Ukrainian and they require their parents to speak Ukrainian at home, and thus the parents get better involved in Ukrainian speaking media. They use Ukrainian language internet. They switch to managing their web pages and social networks in Ukrainian. And talking about the complaints that were received by the Secretariat of the Commissioner for the Protection of State Language, let me repeat it. We had the statistics published in the beginning of the year, so we've got 3,692 applications for different spheres, both for internet, a quarter of everything, so commercials, education, services, government agencies, goods and services. The breakdown by regions is as follows. The biggest number of reports were coming from Kiev on one hand. It means that the number of violations is higher, but at the same time it means that the level of consciousness and unwillingness of the people to cope with those violations or just to reconcile with those violations. Also among the leaders are Kharkiv, Odessa, Dnipropetrovsk, and Kiev regions. We work with the local governments and it yields certain positive results. In compliance with the law on language, the Commissioner exercises all of the controls, and I would like to thank the representatives of the Commissioner for their principality and responsibility, like my colleague Yaroslava Присяжнюк in Odessa, or Victoria Vitar in Sumy, or Ivan Demchenko, or other colleagues of ours who work actively on re-establishment of justice and protecting the right of Ukrainians for protection of the state language. Among the record, well, the most reports are coming from the services sphere, from the post offices, supermarkets, and so on and so forth. Then comes the education. And if we talk about education, it means both state-controlled and private educational institutions, any of those which may provide education services. And unfortunately, then comes the government agencies, and unfortunately they still stay among the violators. It's manifested by the sanctions imposed on the different deputies of the local governments, local councils. Then come the healthcare websites, the commercials, and publishing sphere. But again, that statistics is infinitesimal. Frequently we are being asked about the number of penalties, or our activity is being evaluated by the number of penalties, but I don't think it's relevant, because the imposition of sanctions comes after first warning and then the penalizing itself. So at the face of warning, the violation is rectified in the majority of the cases, and I want to thank for this the citizens of Ukraine, both individuals and legal entities. So within a year we've come up with 128 resolutions, and we've proposed 61 warnings and 28 penalties that ranged from 280 to 8,600 hryvnias. So we don't stop there. We were hoping the statistics would have been better this year, but unfortunately the violations are still there. So talking about the violations by the governments, we've got 237 such reports. We've implemented 16 inspections, identified 11 violations, and we've come up with administrative violation resolutions in a number of 30. So without calling names, I would like to say that apart from people's deputies, they are the head of municipal councils and their deputies. Most violations fall on the Odessa region, then Kharkiv region, Poltava region, Dnipropetrovsk, Mykolaiv, and the same note is shared by Zaporizhia and Kiev. Talking about the education sphere, it's probably the most mess after the biggest after the websites. It's clear that during this period many students they study on a remote basis, and we continue documenting the violations that testify the violation of the language law. So we've got 325 reports, implemented 25 inspections, and the majority of those violations fall on the training courses for the adults, different courses like driving schools, gyms, online courses, and the citizens of Ukraine emphasize it. Then the state-controlled educational institutions governed by the Ministry of Education, and I urge Mr. Minister to pay their attention to the fact that the professors of some universities still violate the rights of the citizens of Ukraine for acquisition of education in state language. Then the secondary schools, which are controlled by municipalities of the communities. It's shame to recognize that almost in every corner of Ukraine there are still such violations. It's pity to recognize that unfortunately even in kindergartens there are violations of this language law. However, the government authorities are responsible on the local level, and we hope they will draw relevant conclusions and do their job before the beginning of the next curriculum year. Talking about the culture, comparing to the previous year, we have way bigger number of reports, and it's related to a number of situations, number of factors. Specifically, I'm talking about the websites of different cultural institutions. We've analyzed 97 of them. 96 of them have a web interface in Ukrainian language. In some theaters there is a number of plays that were played in Russian during the reporting year, 1 in Kharkiv and 2 in Odessa. The names of those theaters are available in our report, but I think that you may already know whom I'm talking about. Also, within the last year we've conducted a number of other monitorings in the media and publishing sphere. Talking about media, we've studied the activities of 14 organizations that were broadcasting on the all-state level. And probably for the first time within the years of independence, we have not documented a single broadcasting of a Russian song. And I clearly understand there is not even a need for this to happen. But still, I want to thank everybody for compliance with the law, for all of the parties. The majority of the songs were in English, more than 67%, and the rest in other languages. So we were doing the monitoring in December, and our employees analyzed 8,834 songs. I don't know about any other agency with such small number of personnel fulfilling such an amount of work. It's a record for us, having listened more than 8,000 songs for the sake of development of Ukrainian language. Talking about publishing, according to the data from the book chamber, an incredible number of books were published. We would like to have them like 100-fold, but still we had those festivals. The book country that was visited by 68,000 citizens of Ukraine, including representatives of our secretariat, which means that the demand for Ukrainian book is growing. The capacities of Ukrainian publishers are growing too, are resuming. Ukrainian writers who write on military topics, who document the crimes of the Russian army, who write fiction, literature, everything is growing. I am humbled to see this explosion of the children's books growth. And Ukraine is among the record states in terms of growth of the publishing in national language. The service sector is one of the most numerous, not the most problematic. It was probably the most problematic until the 16th of January 21. Everybody was concerned that we will be able to somehow destroy the small businesses. That had not happened. However, the service sector is a sector on which the compliance with the language law depends in Ukraine. And generally we got about 100 reports on the absence of the Ukrainian version of websites, of the online shops, and more than 20 reports about the absence of information about the products, product description in Ukrainian language. And we've taken all the reasonable response measures in this respect. So the law is about stabilization and control on part of the government of both shape and content of what's going on in the internet space. As a commissioner for protection of state language, I can tell you that we were analyzing the compliance of Article 27 that says that all of the websites, web pages registered in Ukraine are supposed to have a Ukrainian version loaded by default. In other words, the start page of all the media resources is supposed to be in Ukrainian. In particular, upon the results of our work, we've identified 500,000 of such facts, and in the majority of cases, almost 56% were able to rectify the discrepancies by ensuring the compliance with the right of Ukrainians to see the start page in Ukrainian language. But on top of that, it doesn't only happen like this. We have to identify all of the details about the owner of the website, like their legal address, like the names of the owners, their passport information, to ensure proper correspondence with them. And I appreciate the input of everybody who works to reinforce the state language. Also, I would like to thank the local governments who work in close coordination with us and respond properly to the challenges of time. Apart from the language courses that I've mentioned, and within the last half a year there were about 500 more immersion, the state government was also involved in the development of the state language training program, which only emerged in Ukraine after the application of the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy. Well, we'd like to thank the central government, but also to express the words of the support to the local governments who implemented more than 55 language training programs within the last year. During the years of my work in this office, we've approved more than 100 local language training programs. All of the regions, almost all of the regions complied with this. This is the map of the language programs. It may not be perfect, but you can see by green and red colors that there are still regions where there are no municipal or regional language training programs. In some there are municipal but no regional, or the other way around. And looking at this map, I can say that there is the direct connection between the violation of the state policy. For example, if we don't have the municipal language training program in Kharkiv, we have locations for language training, and Kharkiv is among 3 top leaders on violations of the state language law. It also relates to Poltava, Vinnytsia region, Rivne region, unfortunately, and so on and so forth. All of that information is reflected in our report. So talking about the language training courses, I would like to say that among the leaders of organizations that propose free of charge services for Ukrainian language training, it's Kiev and Kiev region, Lviv region, Dnipropetrovsk region, and Transcarpathian region. Thank you very much, dear heads of the communities. And the statistics by regions is like that. Maybe that data is not quite precise because we were only using the data provided by the state, regional, and central military administrations. If there are some discrepancies, we are ready to rectify our statistics, but there is again the strict relation between the violations and the way of mastering the Ukrainian language. Well, you can see the numbers where the numbers are smaller, where they are bigger. We didn't set a goal for ourselves to show the biggest numbers because all of the locations are supposed to function. They are supposed to stimulate the people to switch to Ukrainian, to ensure the right of the citizens to obtain information in the state language. Among the mandatory components of the compliance with the language law is the fact that 4th year in a row we offer our conclusions, our opinion and recommendations on compliance with the language law. The annual report is published in our website in its start page, and this is how it looks in the printed version. We hand it over to the libraries, to the local administrations, municipal administrations, military units, educational institutions who cooperate with us and provide us with statistics. This statistics is also available in our report that can be the statistics that can be used in their work. So the recommendations are for all of the branches of the government, legislative, executive, and court authorities. And among the recommendations, there are such that will reinforce us on our way to European Union. The accession to European Union is impossible without translations. This is why the factor of the language is one of the basic factors in accession to European community. This is why we urge the government to ensure the translations for all of the documents. I know this work is underway. I want to thank the Prime Minister of Ukraine and others who are involved in this work. But again, this work is gradual, it's systemic, and without it, our accession to European community is impossible. On top of the state language policy approved about a month ago, we need to approve the program of cooperation with Ukrainians abroad that would ensure both cooperation with our Ukrainian diaspora, with citizens of Ukraine who are staying abroad. It's a matter of cooperation with the citizens of Ukraine who were forced to stay outside of our country after the beginning of the war. First of all, I'm talking about the students who come in a number of about 500,000 in Europe and other continents of the world, and labor migrants who were living for dozens of years before. But the cooperation with the patriots of Ukraine abroad is incredibly important for us. Yesterday I had a meeting with an ambassador of Ukraine, the representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for cooperation with Ukrainians abroad, Mariana Betsa. Yesterday MFA presented the artificial intelligence, but it's important to have the institutional capability and institutional capacity of the government officials to assist to the creation of better conditions for protection of language rights of the Ukrainians abroad. The language right of the Ukrainians is to study in school in Ukrainian, and the right of the governments of other countries is to provide the Ukrainians with opportunities to study in their native language. The representatives of business are coming to Ukraine, for example, and over there, abroad, we may provide the opportunities for the foreigners to study Ukrainian language, and we urge the Cabinet of Ministers to approve the standards for standard Ukrainian language, like medical terminology and legal terminology, and also not to forget to develop the terminology in other spheres. And the standard of Ukrainian as a foreign language is currently being reviewed by the relevant commissions. And among other recommendations to the Cabinet of Ministers, we ask them to ensure the amendments to instruction on the track records, and the entries in the track records should be made in Ukrainian language should they be used further on. It's a matter of use of Ukrainian grammar that was approved by the Cabinet of Ministers most recently, and we insist on its use, and we insist the Minister of Education to develop the roadmap for other ministries and government agencies and use it as guidelines for further development of the policy. The national multi-subject test will be used based on the current version of the Ukrainian grammar. Meanwhile, currently, there is the old grammar rules used during the exams. Again, we have certain proposals. We have a number of proposals to the Parliament of Ukraine. We work with all of the committees, and we appreciate the input of all of our colleagues, and we urge them during the next sessions to come to rename those settlements which names are not liked by the citizens of Ukraine. The relevant proposals are already submitted to the committees of the Parliament. We would like to ask to adopt the law on Ukrainian gesture language, or ensure the amendments to the existing legislation. The rights of the people speaking gesture language are protected, but still they are supposed to hear the e-reader. They are supposed to be equipped with the mobile phones. They should have the right to education during the war. All of their rights should be complied with during the martial law. The matter of inclusivity, of accessibility of the services is also one of the values of the democratic Europe and the civilized world. We urge to remake Komsomolsky, Первомайский, Leninsky, all of the course. This list includes more than 100 names, and we hope that such a draft law or other actions shall be taken by the Parliament of Ukraine. We urge to make amendments to the law of Ukraine on the rights of consumers. It should come into effect not later than in year 25, not after the end of hostilities. Why is it important? Because the state language is the matter of national security. The sooner it comes into effect, the sooner we will be able to ensure the compliance with the rights of the consumers. And the same applies to the passport of Ukraine. The blue book with the entries in non-state language should become history. Children should only see it in a museum or study it during history lessons. We should put an end to this maybe this year eventually. Also, we urge the Parliament to take into account the renaming of the settlements and other geographical objects that do not comply with the standards of national language, to bring into compliance the standards of state language in the names of organizations owned and controlled by the government. All of the placards, all of the drawings in the fences of the kindergartens that are related to the Soviet era. Also, we urge the local governments to walk out in the streets, look at the placards, look at the captions. Just such an amount of Russian language that we are able to witness in the streets of our cities, such as Odessa or Kharkiv. We are supposed to put an end to this. We cannot only rely on those who report to us. We cannot walk every street, every single building, every government agency. Every major's office can do it by themselves. Please take a walk and prepare relevant summaries and reports the way it's done in Mykolaiv, Odessa, Kiev, and the majority of other cities. So talking about other recommendations we've expressed during the last year that were complied with or not complied with, I would like to draw your attention to the following. Among our recommendations that were complied with: a state program for mastering of Ukrainian language as a state language was approved. I would like to thank Ministry of Culture and Information Policy for this huge breakthrough. Hopefully, after the meeting of the task force that happened 2 weeks ago, we're going to have more meetings to improve our control. So we rely upon the central and local governments. Please pay attention to it. Our proposals to the amendments regarding the amendments to the law on commercial and advertisement, in coordination with the Parliament and the central government, we've made this huge breakthrough. 18 of our recommendations unfortunately were not complied with. They migrated to the following year recommendations, and hopefully the work will be still underway. So what changes will be happening in year 24 on informing of the citizens of Ukraine? On the 16th of July, the Article 25 of the language law comes into force that contemplates the mandatory printing of media in state language. They should be both printed, published, and disseminated in Ukrainian language. On top of that, another wave of Ukrainization, the law of Ukraine on media, the Article 40 comes into force that envisages the use of non-state language only during stale expressions. This standard is complied with. We urge the media to comply with it, to make sure it's complied with. And on top of that, all of the question statements made in non-Ukrainian language should be dubbed or translated into Ukrainian language. The statistics is complied with, but again, those articles come into force, and if in compliance with the language articles, we impose some sanctions like warning or penalties in compliance with the law on media, is the National Council on Television and Broadcasting, who is supposed to implement such activities. Thank you very much for your interest in this year's report. I hope you have questions, and I will be happy to answer them. Once again, I want to thank our security and defense forces. I want to thank my team, all the representatives of the civil sector, every single Ukrainian who speaks Ukrainian, has switched to Ukrainian, and stimulates others to switch to Ukrainian, thus creating better opportunities for the citizens of Ukraine to reinforce our defense capacity. Thank you very much, Mr. Trust, for such a concentrated report, and I'm having a number of questions about the education. For example, I understand it's the sphere of our life that is of utmost importance to us, and any changes there are of concern to all of the Ukrainians. You've mentioned the positive dynamics of use of Ukrainian language by the professors, but for our understanding, what is this percentage now? What do you document, and what is the situation for the time being in the education sector? Thank you very much. According to the data provided by the Institute of Analytics, 99% of the students have the right to acquisition of education in national language is protected. But in the places of compact residence of the national minorities, also the education is provided in the language of that national minorities. Also, talking about the breakthrough in compliance with the language law since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, let me give you a couple of figures. They are in part reflected in the websites of those internet resources who started studying our annual reports. But I urge you to read it no matter how big is it, because such documents were never made in Ukraine before. So, let me switch to year 22 and the annual report that I brought with myself. So comparing to year 22, years before, the number of schools and classes and the students who switched to Ukraine have multiplied almost 100 times. Talking about the dynamics from year 22 until this day, the number of those who continue switching to Ukrainian and refuse to other languages in education process increased 5-fold more. It's pretty good statistics. So before the full-scale invasion, 455,000 students were studying in non-state language, 500,000. In the year 22, with the beginning of the full-scale invasion, it's only 4,000. Now we have 768 school children who were studying in non-state language, but this statistics is constantly changing. I think that as of the 1st of September, new curriculum year, it will be even improved. It all depends on every single citizen of Ukraine. It all depends on the parents who bring their children to school and write the applications to school. Unfortunately, there is still the order of the Minister of Education in effect that allows them to submit application for the study in non-Ukrainian language. This is why I would like to urge the Ministry of Education to review their orders. Ukrainian language should be 100%, but let's not forget about the languages of national minorities, whose interests should also be reckoned with in compliance with our recommendations and the law on national minorities. We've seen the news about the imposition of 20 penalties. Well, you cannot tell about the personalities, but again, talking about the sectors of activity, on whom were those penalties imposed? Well, it's a small number, but comparing to previous years, it was a bigger number. Previously, we didn't have such an opportunity when the code was not working in part of violation of the state law. They came into effect just recently, but who are those violators? The local deputies, the public servants. One of them was the city mayor, and another one was a deputy city mayor, but of the other regional capital. This information is in the media, but again, those violators, they have switched to Ukrainian. We do not observe any violations in their public addresses anymore, because now there is more access to the sessions of the local councils live. We have an opportunity to analyze them, but unfortunately the violations are still there during the meetings with the citizens, with the denizens, during the public events. Unfortunately, the situation is difficult in the universities, and within the next couple of weeks I will review some cases, and I hope the Ministry of Education, whom I mentioned for the 5th time today, will take into account this factor. I demand the penalties for those professors who keep violating the language law and cannot stabilize the situation in their universities. Thank you very much, Mr. Taras. Do we have any questions on the floor? Ukrinform, I'm having a question about education, about the higher educational institutions. Last year there were complaints coming from the students for the professors who were teaching in non-state language. But can you please tell us whether there were repeated complaints coming from the same students, and if you know about any such cases, did the students report to your office directly, and were there again the repeated cases when the professors refused to use the state language? And if so, can you please give us the number of such cases in higher educational institutions, secondary educational institutions? Do you classify those cases like you've said, we need to standardize the terminology, or is it some principal position of specific people? Okay, the fraction of violations of violators among the professors was fired upon the decisions of the deans of the chairs and directors of the universities. Some of them were deprived of the right to teach in the universities, which obviously results in premature termination of their contracts based on the violation of the statute of educational institution. Within the last year, 30% of the reports from education sphere was with regard to university professors. And it's a pleasure for us when the Council of Directors, the chair of the educational institutions, proposes some active measures, but on our end we also ensure certain activities. For example, we've implemented the Institute of Student Ombudsman. We've created a network of them. We have representatives in many educational institutions who enjoy our support, and I would like to thank all of the students who respond to the facts of violation, whether in medical universities or financial, pedagogical, classical, national universities. It's very important for us because it's the matter of cleansing, of establishment of Ukrainian language in the education sphere. So the more reports we get from the university, the more additional arguments the Ministry of Education can consider and to early terminate the contracts with the relevant professors. When I'm hearing about the facts of violations, and they say like, oh, this is the peculiarity of our region, and we say this is the peculiarity of our legislation. Well, you don't like something about your region, so keep working, because on Odessa universities it depends the way the people speak outside in the streets. The missile strikes on Odessa today is the 10th anniversary of tragedy in Odessa. Again, it's another evidence of the fact that Odessa is the city of resilience. It's an unbreakable city. It switched to Ukrainian, but again, we have to reinforce it in Odessa itself and in the regional centers to the south of Odessa, where unfortunately, according to the information we have, the rights of the minorities are still violated, and all of the processes come in Russian language. We have more questions. Metro Didora, Espresso TV channel, civil organization Spilna Mova shocked everybody with the statement that the school children in Kiev, 40% of the school children in Kiev do not or kindergarten children, they don't understand Ukrainian language. Well, so school children or kindergarten age? Well, kindergarten age as they come to school. So what can be the problem behind that? Is it like us underperforming in the kindergartens, or is it the problem of parents educating and raising their children in Russian language? And what would be your recommendation for the parents? How should they adapt to this situation? Well, you know, given the conditions of the war, some insignificant fraction of the kindergarten age children are covered with the kindergarten education on a remote basis. We have the statistics. Within the last year, a little bit more than a half of the children is covered by such education programs, including 25% who study on a remote basis. So a half of the kindergarten age children, preschool age children, are educated by their families, by their grandparents and parents. So it's first of all up to the parents what language children use in their early life, and then it influences the way and the language children use at home. So the stronger are the positions of the local government in ensuring the access of the citizens of Ukraine to the language training courses, the bigger the resilience of the parents, the better is the situation in the preschool and school educational institutions. We cannot afford convincing 20, 30 and 40 years old parents during the year 11 of the war that we have to use state Ukrainian language. It's very important. So talking about this report, we've taken it into account in our annual summary. Some may dislike it, but again, rectify the mistakes, implement the response measures, because the preschool education is about ensuring proper conditions in those educations. Unfortunately, preschool education is not regulated by this law. There is the colossal talent hunger, there is a lack of personnel, the salaries are very low there, and if you look at the statistics of the employment offices, the situation is catastrophic in our kindergartens, with salaries, with shelters and stuff like that. It's a matter of accessibility, and it differs on a regional level. It differs region to region. I visit different educational institutions in different regions, yes, and the situation is catastrophic in many places, but still I would like to urge everybody to comply with the law on state language and to ensure the access of the smallest Ukrainians to the state language. Well, another question I'm having, the sector of services may be not as important as the sector of education on a fundamental level, but it's something that we face in our daily life. In one of the slides you mentioned that this sector is transforming quite intensely, but again the biggest number of reports is still coming from that sector, and it's among those where violations are thriving. So how can we improve situation here? What are the tools? What are the measures that we can take? So let me tell you, let me put it like this. Talking about the chains, the supermarkets, the situation is rectified. The Article 30 mentions that use of the Ukrainian language is mandatory, but talking about the small businesses, such problems happen with them. So I urge all of those in Mykolaiv, the place of my origin, and those who pour coffee in Kharkiv or Odessa, those who sell everyday use products, please comply with the language law. I'm very displeased when I meet people who heroically do their job, and in Kherson there are prominent coffee shops where everybody is coming even under the enemy's fire, but again the compliance with the language law is very important. So again, I recommend it. The statistics is general for Ukraine. There are specifics, there are peculiarities for every region, there are specific factors, but I think everything will change in year 24, because it's every Ukrainian who can observe, everybody switching to Ukrainian who can observe this process. Thank you very much. I want to thank you for this great job you've done. I want to thank spectators and journalists for the interest to the topic, and I want to thank the main guarantor of the existence of the national language, our security and defense forces. Thank you very much. Glory to the heroes. Glory to Ukraine.